You think you can sing my song, little girl? Damon Cross's voice cut through the roar of 500 people packed into the Orpheum Theater and 2 million more watching the live stream as he dragged 11-year-old Naomi Brooks into the spotlight. The superstar's smile never reached his eyes. He leaned close, his whisper sharp as broken glass. Fail quietly. This wasn't a charity moment. This was a trap. Because 90 minutes earlier, backstage in a locked dressing room, Naomi had heard something that could destroy him. A secret worth millions, built on stolen voices and shattered dreams. Now, under blinding lights, with her worn discount store blouse and trembling hands, she had one choice: protect a lie that fed an empire, or speak a truth that could bury her family forever. If you stay with me until the end of this story, please like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Naomi's voice can travel. The morning had started like every other Saturday in Naomi Brooks's life, small, careful, and measured in pennies. She stood in the cramped bathroom of their third-floor apartment, the mirror fogged from her mother's earlier shower, and studied the blouse hanging on the back of the door. White cotton, size too big. The plastic tag still dangled from the collar, swaying slightly in the draft that crept through the window frame her landlord had promised to fix 6 months ago. "Mama, you sure about this?" Naomi called through the thin walls. "Baby, you're singing at the Orpheum Theater." Her mother's voice floated from the kitchen, tight with the particular strain of a woman stretching $15 across 3 days. "You're going to look like you belong there." Naomi touched the fabric. $10.47 at the discount store on Fletcher Avenue. Her mother had spent 20 minutes comparing prices, holding blouses up to the light, checking seams with the practiced eye of someone who knew exactly how many washes a garment could survive. They both understood the unspoken truth. If Naomi didn't stain it, if she kept the tag intact and hidden, they could return it Monday morning and reclaim most of their grocery money. She pulled the blouse on carefully, hyper-aware of every movement. The sleeves hung past her wrists. She rolled them twice, tucked the tag down the back of her collar where it wouldn't show, and examined herself in the streaked mirror. 11 years old, dark skin that glowed warm in sunlight but looked ashen under the apartment's fluorescent bulbs. Hair pulled into 2 careful puffs her mother had shaped the night before, using the last of the edge control. Eyes too old for her face, the kind of eyes that came from counting change for bread, from hearing her mother cry quietly on the phone with the electric company, from understanding that maybe next month meant probably never. But when Naomi opened her mouth to hum, just a soft, ascending scale, something shifted in her reflection. Her spine straightened. Her shoulders dropped. The cramped bathroom with its peeling linoleum and rust-stained sink fell away. Perfect pitch. That's what Mr. Chen, her school's music teacher, called it. The ability to hear a note once and reproduce it exactly, to identify every sound in a composition, to sing an absolute tune without accompaniment. 1 in 10,000 people had it. Naomi was one of them, and she had something rarer still, a voice that could climb and soar and break hearts, all from a child whose shoes were held together with superglue and hope. "Naomi, bus comes in 10 minutes. She grabbed her backpack, lightweight because she'd learned to carry only essentials, and found her mother in the kitchen packing 2 sandwiches into a reused bread bag. Teresa Brooks was 34 but looked 50. 2 jobs, no husband, and a daughter whose talent blazed so bright it terrified her. She pressed the sandwiches into Naomi's hands. "Peanut butter. Save 1 for after, okay? They're not going to feed you at that fancy theater." "Mama, it's just a school choir thing. We're probably singing 2 songs and leaving." "Baby." Teresa cupped Naomi's face, her hands rough from years of cleaning other people's houses. "You're singing at the Orpheum. You know who performs there? Real artists, professional people. This could be—" She stopped herself, but Naomi heard the rest. "This could be your way out." They both carried that dream like a live wire, dangerous to touch, impossible to let go. The bus was 12 minutes late, which meant Naomi ran the last 3 blocks to Washington Heights Middle School, her backpack bouncing against her spine, the price tag scratching the back of her neck. She arrived breathless to find the rest of the choir already loading onto the rented coach. "Brooks, thought you weren't coming." Mr. Chen stood at the bus door, clipboard in hand, his expression somewhere between relief and exasperation. "Sorry, Mr. Chen, bus was—" "I know, get in, we're already behind." Naomi climbed aboard and found an empty seat near the back. The other kids buzzed with nervous energy, 30 voices from Washington Heights Middle, selected to open for some charity concert at the Orpheum. They'd been rehearsing for 6 weeks, learning 3 songs: a gospel arrangement, a pop medley, and Lift Every Voice, which Mr. Chen had chosen specifically because half their choir couldn't afford the fancy concert dress code, and he wanted them to sing something that honored where they came from. Destiny Williams slid into the seat beside Naomi, her braids clicking with plastic beads. "Girl, you ready for this? My auntie said the Orpheum got chandeliers and velvet seats and everything." "It's just a theater," Naomi said, but her hands were shaking slightly. "Just a theater?" "Naomi, Damon Cross performed there last year, sold out in 30 seconds. My cousin paid $400 for nosebleed seats." Damon Cross. Even Naomi, who didn't own a phone and whose internet came from the public library, knew that name. Pop soul superstar. 6 Grammys. A voice that could supposedly shatter glass and melt hearts. His concerts were legendary. 3-hour performances where he ran through octaves like a man possessed, hitting notes other singers wouldn't attempt. "Why is everybody so obsessed with him?" Naomi asked. Destiny stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Because he's Damon Cross. Because when he sings Gravity, you know, that song about falling and flying, he holds the final note for like 30 seconds. Nobody else can do that. He's got the range of an angel." Naomi said nothing, but something about the reverence in Destiny's voice made her uneasy. She'd heard Gravity before, played from a car radio while she waited for the bus. The song was beautiful, she couldn't deny that. Haunting melody, lyrics that ached with longing, and that final note, a soaring, sustained high C that seemed to defy human limitation. But Naomi's perfect pitch had caught something odd in that recording. A tiny discrepancy. A smoothness that didn't match the grain of the rest of the vocal. She'd dismissed it as production, studio magic, the kind of thing professional artists used. She didn't know, not yet, that she'd heard the truth buried in the lie. The Orpheum Theater rose from the downtown streets like a cathedral, all marble columns and gold trim, the marquee blazing even in daylight. The bus pulled around to the service entrance, and Mr. Chen herded them out with sharp efficiency. "Single file. Do not touch anything. Do not wander off. We have 90 minutes before curtain, and if any of you embarrass this school, I will personally ensure you never sing in public again. Am I clear?" A chorus of "Yes, Mr. Chen" followed them through the stage door. Inside, the theater was controlled chaos. Stagehands hauling equipment, sound engineers shouting into headsets. The lighting director balanced on a ladder, adjusting spots. And everywhere, the hum of expensive production. The kind that came with corporate sponsors and live streaming, and people whose job titles Naomi didn't understand. Mr. Chen led them to a holding room, really just a wide hallway with folding chairs and a water cooler. "Wait here. Warm up quietly. I'm going to confirm our set time." The moment he left, the choir fractured into anxious clusters. Some kids vocalized, running scales. Others pressed their faces to the narrow window that looked out onto the stage. Destiny grabbed Naomi's arm. "Come on, let's explore." "Destiny," Mr. Chen said, "Mr. Chen's going to be gone for 20 minutes. We'll just peek around." "Come on." Against her better judgment, Naomi followed. They slipped through the hallway, past dressing rooms labeled with names Naomi didn't recognize, past a catering table laden with fruit platters and bottled water that probably cost more than her mother's weekly grocery budget. They were about to turn back when Naomi heard it. Singing. Not the polished, perfect sound of a recording. Raw, unsteady, and wrong. She stopped so abruptly that Destiny bumped into her. "What?" "Shh." Naomi tilted her head, tracking the sound. It came from a dressing room at the end of the hall. Door closed, but not all the way. Light spilled through the gap. And inside, someone was struggling. "Naomi, we should go!" But Naomi's feet moved on their own. She crept closer, her heart hammering, and when she reached the door, she pressed her ear to the gap. A man's voice, frustrated. Again, from the bridge. Piano notes, perfectly in tune. And then a vocal attempt, trying for a high C, straining, cracking, falling short by at least a full step. Damn it! The word exploded. Something crashed. 18 years. 18 years I've sold this lie. And now, Damon, breathe. A woman's voice, calm, practiced. The playback's perfect. You just have to mouth it convincingly. Nobody will know. What if someone notices? What if I can't? You've done this 100 times. Stick to the choreography, let the track carry you, and smile. That's all you've ever had to do. Silence. Then, bitterly, I used to be able to hit it. Before the nodes, I used to be real. You're real enough. Now stop spiraling and get your head on. Curtains in 70 minutes. Footsteps approached the door. Naomi's blood turned to ice. She spun, grabbed Destiny's wrist, and yanked her around the corner just as the door opened. They flattened against the wall, barely breathing, as two figures emerged. Naomi risked a glance. The woman wore all black, sleek, professional, the kind of expensive simplicity that screamed power. She carried a tablet and walked with the brisk efficiency of someone managing a crisis. And beside her, running a hand through his hair, dressed in a casual designer outfit that probably cost more than Naomi's mother made in a month, was Damon Cross. In person, he looked smaller than his publicity photos. Handsome, yes, but tired. Lines around his eyes, tension in his jaw. And as Naomi watched him disappear down the hallway, trailed by the woman murmuring something soothing and strategic, one thought crystallized in her mind with perfect, terrible clarity. He can't sing. The voice the world worshipped, the impossible range, the angelic high notes, the legendary sustain, it was fake. Playback. Studio trickery. A lie so polished and protected that millions of people had bought tickets, streamed songs, and built their dreams on a foundation of absolutely nothing. Destiny grabbed her arm. Did you just see? We have to go. Now. They ran back to the holding room, slipping in just before Mr. Chen returned. Naomi sank into a folding chair, her pulse roaring in her ears. She'd stumbled into something massive, a secret worth millions, maybe billions. The kind of truth that powerful people paid fortunes to bury. And she was 11 years old, wearing a blouse her mother would return for grocery money, with no proof, no power, and no idea what to do. Fail quietly, a voice whispered in her mind. Say nothing. Sing your 2 songs, and go home. But Naomi had been raised by a woman who scrubbed floors and still stood tall. She'd been taught that truth mattered, that lies, even comfortable ones, rotted everything they touched. She didn't know, not yet, that the choice to speak or stay silent wouldn't be hers to make. Because Damon Cross was about to drag her into the spotlight and dare her to survive. Oh, the choir's performance went flawlessly. They opened with the gospel arrangement, 30 young voices blending into something that made the chandeliers seem to shiver. The audience, settling into velvet seats and pulling out phones to record, responded with warm applause. Then the pop medley, upbeat and bright, designed to showcase their range. And finally, lift every voice. Mr. Chen conducted with his whole body, sweat beading on his forehead, pride radiating from every gesture. When Naomi's solo line came, 8 bars of pure crystalline sound, the theater went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with manners. She sang the way she'd been born to sing. No affectation, no performance. Just truth, shaped into melody. In the front row, a critic from the Metro Arts Journal stopped typing mid-sentence. In the balcony, a talent scout from Veritas Records leaned forward. And backstage, watching on a monitor as he prepared for his entrance, Damon Cross went very, very still. "Who the hell is that kid?" he asked. His manager, Simone Watts, glanced at the screen. "School choir, Washington Heights Middle. They're the opener. The one singing solo. Find out everything about her." "Damon, you're on in 15... Find out." Simone's fingers flew across her tablet. 30 seconds later, she had a name, a school record, and a face. Naomi Brooks, 11, perfect pitch, according to her teacher's notes. Scholarship student, single mother, low-income housing, no prior professional experience. Damon studied the monitor. The girl was small, her blouse too big, her posture uncertain until the music started. But when she sang, something shifted. She wasn't performing, she was revealing. And she had the kind of raw, natural gift that made people like him, people who'd built empires on smoke and mirrors, look like frauds. She was in the hallway earlier, Damon said quietly. Outside my dressing room. Simone's expression froze. You think she heard? I think, Damon said slowly, that little girl is about to become a problem. Or an opportunity. Depends on how we play it. Damon, no, do not. Get her name into the intro. I'm bringing her on stage. What? Trust me. Damon's smile was the one that had sold out stadiums. Confident, charming, utterly hollow. I'm going to make that kid a star, right before I bury her. Naomi and the rest of the choir were backstage, giddy and exhausted when the stagehand found them. Naomi Brooks? She looked up, her heart still racing from the performance. Yeah? Mr. Cross wants you on stage. Now. The hallway went silent. Mr. Chen stepped forward. I'm sorry, what? Damon Cross. He's doing an audience participation thing, and he requested Naomi specifically. It'll be quick, just one song. Destiny grabbed Naomi's hand, her eyes huge. Oh my God, Naomi, you're going to sing with Damon Cross. But Naomi didn't feel excitement. She felt the cold, creeping certainty of a trap snapping shut. I don't think I should. It's an honor, the stagehand said, impatience creeping into his voice. You've got 90 seconds to get to stage left. Move. Mr. Chen squeezed her shoulder. You've got this, Naomi. Just be yourself. But herself was a poor kid with perfect pitch who'd overheard a secret that could destroy a god. And gods didn't forgive. Naomi walked on numb legs toward the stage entrance. The roar of the crowd grew louder. 500 people in the seats. 2 million watching online. The lights were blinding, the heat oppressive. And there, in the center of it all, microphone in hand, smile bright as a blade, stood Damon Cross. He spotted her in the wings, pointed. The spotlight swung and caught her, pinning her in place. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring someone special out here. You just heard the most incredible voice from the Washington Heights Middle School Choir. 11 years old, and already she's got a gift most of us spend lifetimes chasing. Naomi Brooks, come on out. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, whistles. Naomi felt hands on her back pushing her forward. She stumbled into the light, blinking, her too big blouse suddenly blazing white under the spots. Damon strode toward her, microphone extended. Don't be shy. How about we give her another round of applause? The noise was deafening. Naomi's hands trembled. Damon leaned down, his smile never wavering, and spoke into her ear, just loud enough for her to hear, just quiet enough the microphones wouldn't catch it. You were outside my dressing room, weren't you? It wasn't a question. Naomi's breath stopped. I'm going to ask you to sing with me, Damon continued, his voice honey smooth even as his fingers tightened slightly on her shoulder. And you're going to do exactly what I say. Fail quietly. Smile. Take the moment. And forget every single thing you think you heard. Do you understand? She looked up at him, at the face that sold magazines and concert tickets, at the eyes that held no warmth at all. And in that moment, Naomi Brooks made the choice that would change everything. She stepped back from his grip, lifted her chin, and said loudly enough for the front rows to hear, I understand, Mr. Cross, but I have a question first. Damon's smile flickered, just for a second. Of course. What's your question, sweetheart? Naomi's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The price tag scratched her neck. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. You look like you belong there. She belonged to the truth. And the truth was standing under 2 million watching eyes, holding a microphone, pretending to be something he wasn't. When you sing Gravity, Naomi said clearly, her voice carrying across the stunned silence, the final high C, the one everyone says is impossible. Damon's expression went flat. Can you sing it right now? Without the track? The Orpheum Theater, packed with 500 people and streaming to 2 million more, went absolutely silent. And Damon Cross realized, too late, that he'd dragged a girl with perfect pitch and nothing to lose into the one spotlight he could never survive. The trap he'd built for her had just snapped shut on him instead. The silence lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds where Naomi could hear her own pulse hammering in her ears, where the weight of 2 million eyes pressed against her skin, where Damon Cross's manufactured smile froze into something sharp and dangerous. Then the crowd erupted, not in applause, but in chaos. Gasps, nervous laughter, a ripple of confusion spreading through the velvet seats like a wave hitting shore. In the balcony, phones tilted upward, recording everything. In the production booth, the director screamed into his headset for someone to cut to commercial, cut to anything, but the live stream had no commercials, and the moment was already viral, already unstoppable. Damon's hand remained on Naomi's shoulder, his grip tightening just enough to hurt. "That's a funny question," he said into his microphone, his voice carrying that practiced charm even as his eyes went cold. "You know, sweetheart, studio recordings are different from live performance. There's production, layering, effects." "I know about production," Naomi interrupted, her voice smaller than his, but cutting through his explanation like a blade through silk. "But you said in your Rolling Stone interview last year that you record live vocals. No auto-tune, no correction, just you and the microphone." Someone in the front row whispered, "She's right. He did say that." Damon's smile stretched wider, and Naomi recognized the expression. She'd seen it on the face of the landlord who'd tried to evict them, on the administrator who'd suggested her mother consider other schools, when Naomi had earned the scholarship spot another family wanted. It was the smile of someone powerful, realizing they'd underestimated someone powerless, and deciding to crush them for it. "Well," Damon said, releasing her shoulder and spreading his arms wide to encompass the theater, "I guess we've got ourselves a little skeptic. You know what? I love this. This is what live music is about, raw, unscripted moments. So let me ask you a question, Naomi." He turned to face her fully, and the spotlight operators adjusted, putting them both in a pool of white light that felt like standing on the surface of the sun. "You've got perfect pitch, right? That's what your teacher told my team. You can hear things other people miss." "Yes, sir." "So here's what we're going to do." Damon gestured to the band, still visible in the pit below the stage. "Gentlemen, if you would, let's run Gravity. Full arrangement. And Naomi here is going to help me out, because this isn't about me proving anything. This is about sharing the stage with the next generation of talent, about mentorship, about lifting up young voices." The words sounded beautiful, generous, exactly the kind of thing that would play perfectly in tomorrow's headlines. Damon Cross gives unknown choir girl her big break. But Naomi heard what he wasn't saying. "I'm going to make you complicit in my lie, or I'm going to humiliate you so thoroughly you'll never speak again." The band launched into the opening bars of Gravity, that haunting piano melody that had sold 20 million copies, that had soundtrack proposals and funerals and the loneliest nights of a generation. The crowd settled, anticipation building. Phones stayed raised. The live stream counter ticked upward, 2.1 million, 2.3 million. Damon began to sing. His voice was good. Naomi had to admit that. Professionally trained, well-supported, with the kind of technical control that came from expensive coaching. He moved through the verses with practiced ease, hitting his marks, working the stage with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. But when the bridge approached, when the song began its ascent toward that legendary final note, Naomi's perfect pitch caught the shift. The backing track swelled. Strings, harmonies, and buried underneath, so subtle most ears would never catch it, a pre-recorded vocal line. Damon's live microphone was still hot. He was still singing. But the voice filling the theater, the one climbing higher, purer, more powerful than any human voice had a right to be, was coming from the speakers. He was lip-syncing to his own fraud. Naomi watched his throat, watched the tendons that should have been straining, watched the breath support that should have been visible in his chest and diaphragm, but wasn't. She saw the tiny delay between his mouth movements and the sound, the microscopic desynchronization that perfect pitch made obvious, and she understood, with sudden, terrible clarity, why he'd brought her on stage. If she stayed silent, she became part of the machinery, a prop in his performance, another person who'd seen the truth and chosen the lie because the lie was easier, safer, more profitable. But if she spoke, if she interrupted this moment, broadcast to millions, she wouldn't just be challenging Damon Cross. She'd be challenging everyone who'd believed in him, everyone who'd built their own dreams on the foundation of his manufactured perfection. She'd be the villain who ruined the magic. The song climbed higher. Damon spread his arms, his face tilted upward in an expression of artistic transcendence. The backing vocal, his backing vocal, soared into the final sustained high C, 30 seconds. Impossible. Perfect. Fake. The crowd began to cheer before the note even finished, already conditioned to worship this moment they'd heard 1,000 times. And Naomi made her choice. She walked to the edge of the stage to where the band director sat with his hands on the soundboard and said, clearly, into the silence that followed the final chord, "Can you turn off the backing track, please?" The band director looked up at her, confused. "What?" The pre-recorded vocal. "Can you turn it off? I want to hear Mr. Cross sing it live." The theater went quiet again, but this time the silence had teeth. Damon's expression cracked, just for a second, just long enough for the front row cameras to catch it. Then he laughed, a sound full of forced warmth. "Naomi, honey, that's not how concerts work. The backing track is part of the arrangement. You said no auto-tune, no correction, just you and the microphone." Naomi turned to face him, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "So sing it, right now, just you." "This is ridiculous," Simone Watts materialized from the wings, her tablet clutched like a weapon, her voice sharp with barely controlled fury. "This child is disrupting a professional production. Let her ask," someone shouted from the balcony. "If he can sing it, what's the problem?" The cry was picked up, multiplied. "Sing it live! Let's hear it! Come on, Damon!" What had started as Naomi's quiet challenge was becoming a mob demand, fueled by phones and live streams, and the particular hunger of an audience that sensed blood in the water. Damon looked at Simone. Simone looked at the director. The director looked at his soundboard, his finger hovering over the controls that would strip away the lie and leave nothing but truth. And in that moment, Damon Cross made the calculation that had sustained his career for 18 years. Giving people what they wanted was worth more than showing them what was real. "Fine," he said, his voice carrying across the theater with the force of someone who'd decided to turn crisis into theater. "You want raw? You want live? Let's do this." He gestured sharply to the director. "Kill the track. All of it. Just the band." The director, looking like a man watching a car crash in slow motion, complied. The backing vocals cut out. The careful layering vanished. What remained was just the piano, the strings, the drums, and Damon Cross, standing alone in the spotlight with a microphone and nowhere left to hide. "From the bridge," Damon said. "Naomi, you're going to sing this with me. And when we get to that final note, we'll both hit it, together. Show everyone what young talent can do." It was a brilliant pivot. Make her complicit. Make it a duet. If they both sang, any weakness in his voice would be masked by hers, and he could claim afterward that he'd been supporting her, holding back to give her space. But Naomi had spent 11 years learning to listen. Really listen. To the things people said and the things they meant. To the notes that were sung and the ones that were stolen. "Okay," she said quietly. "But you go first. I want to hear you hit the note alone. Then I'll follow." Damon's jaw tightened. "That's not how duets work. You're the professional," Naomi said. "Show me how it's done." Trapped. He was trapped by his own image, his own legend, his own insistence that he was the greatest living vocalist of his generation. To refuse now would be to admit weakness. To accept was to expose the lie. He accepted. "Fine. Watch and learn, kid." Damon turned to the band, snapped his fingers. "From bar 64, let's go." The piano began, soft, building. The melody that had made Damon Cross a household name, that had sold out stadiums and spawned 1,000 covers, now played without its safety net. Damon sang the bridge. His voice was still good, controlled, professional, technically proficient. But Naomi heard the strain creeping in, heard him adjusting his approach to the high notes, adding runs and flourishes to distract from the way he was avoiding the upper register. And then the moment arrived, the final climb, the legendary high C that supposedly only Damon Cross could sustain. He planted his feet, took a visible breath, closed his eyes, and sang. The note that came out was close. Maybe an A, possibly a B flat on a generous assessment. But it wasn't a C, and it sure as hell wasn't the pure, crystalline, impossibly sustained sound that had made Gravity famous. His voice cracked halfway through, audibly, a break so clear that even people without perfect pitch heard it. He tried to recover, to push through, to muscle the note into submission. But the damage was done. After 5 seconds, nowhere near the legendary 30, his voice gave out completely. The note died. Damon lowered the microphone, his face flushed, his chest heaving. And Naomi said, into the catastrophic silence, "That was an A flat. The original recording is a C. You're missing a major third." She didn't say it cruelly, didn't gloat, just stated it the way she might have corrected a math problem or identified a bird by its call. A fact. Simple. Irrefutable. Damon stared at her. "You're 11 years old. You don't know have perfect pitch," Naomi said. "I know exactly what I heard, and what you just sang isn't what's on the recording. Studio effects. You said no effects. You said it was live. You told Rolling Stone and Billboard and every interviewer for 18 years that your voice is natural, that you don't need technology, that you're real." Her voice cracked on that last word, and suddenly she wasn't just challenging him. She was accusing him in front of 500 people and however many millions were watching online. "So which is it?" Naomi asked. "Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Damon's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, not gently, not like a mentor guiding a student, hard enough to bruise. "Listen, you little... Don't touch her!" The shout came from the wings. Mr. Chen pushing past stagehands, his face blazing with protective fury. But before he could reach the stage, another voice cut through the chaos, strong, female, carrying the weight of someone who'd been silent too long. "She's right. He can't sing it. He never could." Every head in the theater turned. A woman stood in the center aisle, phone raised, recording everything. She was maybe 35, black, beautiful, with the kind of presence that suggested she'd walked these same stages before. Her voice was clear, trained, and absolutely certain. "My name is Talia Monroe," she said, "and I'm the one who sang that note. I'm the voice on Gravity. I'm the voice on half his songs, and Damon Cross has been paying me, paying all of us, to stay silent while he takes credit for our work." The theater exploded. Damon released Naomi's arm like she'd burned him. "That's a lie. That's a delusional..." "I have contracts," Talia said, walking down the aisle toward the stage, her phone steady, her expression calm with the particular peace of someone who'd been drowning and had finally decided to breathe. "I have NDAs. I have emails from your manager. I have payment records, and I have witnesses." She reached the stage, climbed the steps, and stood beside Naomi, this 11-year-old girl in a too-big blouse who'd asked one simple question and cracked open a lie that had sustained an empire. "You want to hear what Damon Cross actually sounds like?" Talia asked the crowd. "Ask him to sing the note, right now. No track. No excuses. Just him and the microphone he's been hiding behind for 18 years. Damon looked at Simone. Simone was already typing furiously on her tablet, probably calling lawyers, publicists, crisis management teams. The director had his hands over his face. The band sat frozen in the pit, instruments silent. And Naomi, standing between the fraud and the truth-teller, realized something profound. She hadn't destroyed Damon Cross's career with her question. She'd just given everyone else permission to stop pretending. The crowd began to chant, quietly at first, then building. "Sing it, sing it, sing it." Damon gripped the microphone so hard his knuckles went white. He looked at the cameras, at the faces in the darkness, at the phones recording his unraveling. "This is a setup," he said. "This woman is trying to extort..." "Then sue me," Talia said calmly. "Take me to court. Let's put all those contracts and NDAs in front of a judge. Let's depose every session singer who's ever covered for you. Let's talk about where your voice actually ends and ours begins." She turned to Naomi. "Can you sing it? The note he can't hit?" Naomi looked down at her hands, at the blouse her mother would need to return, at the scholarship to Washington Heights Middle that could be revoked if the wrong people decided she'd caused too much trouble. She thought about her mother, scrubbing floors, about the apartment with the broken window, about the bus that was always late, and the sandwiches in reused bags and the careful way they counted pennies. She thought about truth and cost, and whether an 11-year-old girl should have to choose between them. Then she thought about her voice, the gift she'd been born with, the one thing that was entirely hers, that couldn't be bought or sold or stolen unless she let it be. "Yes," Naomi said, "I can sing it." Talia smiled, and it was the saddest, proudest expression Naomi had ever seen. "Then show them what real sounds like." Naomi walked to center stage. Damon had backed away, his empire crumbling around him in real time, his face ashen under the lights. The band director looked at her. "Do you need the accompaniment?" "No," Naomi said. "Just the note. A cappella." She closed her eyes, felt the heat of the spotlight, heard her mother's voice. "You look like you belong there." She belonged to herself. And she sang. Soft at first, just finding the pitch. Then building, not with effort, but with the easy confidence of someone who'd been born to do exactly this. The note rose, pure and clear, no strain, no break, a high C that could shatter glass and mend hearts. She held it. 10 seconds. 15. 20. And then, because she could, because this moment was hers and she'd earned it with nothing but truth, she went higher, into a range Damon Cross had never even attempted, into territory reserved for the genuinely gifted. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then Mr. Chen started clapping. Slow. Deliberate. He was joined by Destiny, by the rest of the choir, by the orchestra in the pit. The applause spread through the crowd like wildfire. Standing ovation, tears streaming down faces, phones capturing everything. And Damon Cross, the man who'd built a career on stolen voices, stood in the ruins of his own mythology and understood that he'd lost. Not to scandal, not to controversy, to an 11-year-old girl who'd simply told the truth. Simone grabbed his arm. "We're leaving. Now. Don't say another word." They fled the stage. Damon, Simone, the team of handlers who'd protected the lie for nearly 2 decades. Talia watched them go, then turned to Naomi. "You know what you just did?" Talia asked quietly. Naomi shook her head, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline draining out of her so fast she felt dizzy. "You freed us," Talia said. "Every singer who signed those contracts, who buried their voice to make him rich. You just gave us permission to stand up." "I just asked a question," Naomi whispered. "The right question," Talia corrected. "At the right moment, with the whole world watching." Mr. Chen reached the stage, his choir behind him, all 30 kids buzzing with shock and pride and fear about what happened next. He wrapped an arm around Naomi's shoulders. "We need to get you out of here," he said, "before the media circus starts." But it was already too late. Backstage, reporters were pushing past security. The director's phone was ringing off the hook. And online, the clips were spreading. Naomi's question, Damon's failure, Talia's revelation, and that final perfect note that couldn't be faked or bought or buried. The truth, sung into existence by a girl who'd had nothing to lose and everything to prove. As Mr. Chen hustled the choir toward the exit, Naomi caught one last glimpse of the stage. The spotlight still burned. The microphone still stood. The theater still held its breath. And she understood, with the particular wisdom of someone who'd just crossed a line they could never uncross, that this wasn't an ending. This was the moment before everything changed. The part where the powerful decide whether to accept defeat or declare war. And Naomi Brooks, 11 years old, perfect pitch, discount store blouse and all, had just made herself the enemy of a man who had everything to lose and no intention of losing it quietly. The bus ride back to Washington Heights felt like traveling through a different universe than the one they'd left that morning. Naomi sat in the same seat near the back, Destiny pressed against the window beside her, but everything had shifted. The other kids whispered in tight clusters, phones out despite Mr. Chen's rules, refreshing social media feeds that were exploding in real time. Every 30 seconds, someone would gasp, turn their screen to show their neighbor, and the whispers would surge louder. Naomi kept her eyes on her hands. The blouse, her mother's returnable blouse, had a wrinkle near the collar, a smudge on the cuff. Small damages that would probably go unnoticed at the return counter, but felt enormous right now, like evidence of how thoroughly everything had changed. Naomi? Destiny's voice was barely audible over the engine noise. It's everywhere, like everywhere. I don't want to see. No, you need to. Destiny thrust her phone forward anyway. The screen showed a Twitter feed, posts cascading so fast the eye could barely track them. Video clips of Naomi asking her question, of Damon's voice cracking, of Talia's revelation, of that final note Naomi had sung, already remixed, shared, dissected by millions. The view counter on the original live stream had passed 8 million. They're calling you a hero, Destiny said. People are saying you exposed the biggest fraud in music history. Naomi closed her eyes. I just asked him to sing. Yeah, and he couldn't, and now everybody knows. Destiny scrolled further. Look, Talia Monroe's trending. She posted receipts, like actual contracts showing Damon paid her $75,000 to record vocals for Gravity and sign an NDA, and she says there are 6 other singers who did the same thing on different songs. Mr. Chen's voice cut through from the front of the bus. Phones away, all of you, right now. Reluctant compliance rippled through the choir. Destiny pocketed her phone but leaned close to Naomi. My mom's already called me twice. She saw it online. She wants to know if you're okay. I don't know if I'm okay, Naomi whispered. You were amazing up there. That note you sang. Naomi, I got chills. We all did. But Destiny didn't understand. None of them did. They saw the triumph, the David versus Goliath moment, the truth spoken to power, the perfect note that couldn't be denied. They didn't see what came next. The machine, the lawyers, the publicists who made their living burying inconvenient truths under mountains of money and influence. Naomi had poked a bear, and bears didn't just roll over and accept defeat. The bus pulled up to Washington Heights Middle 40 minutes later. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cracked parking lot. Mr. Chen stood at the front, his expression grave. Listen to me, all of you. He waited until every eye was on him. What happened today was extraordinary. Naomi showed tremendous courage, but it's also going to bring attention, the kind of attention that can be overwhelming and sometimes dangerous. If reporters contact you, if strangers ask questions, you say nothing. You refer them to me or to the school administration. You do not post about this on social media. You do not give interviews. You protect yourselves and you protect each other. Understood? A chorus of uncertain agreement. Naomi, you stay for a minute. Everyone else, go home. Be smart. Be safe. The bus emptied. Destiny squeezed Naomi's hand before leaving, whispering, Text me when you can. When they were alone, Mr. Chen sat down across the aisle. He looked exhausted, more than exhausted, hollowed out. Your mother's on her way, he said quietly. I called her during the ride. She knows what happened. Naomi's stomach dropped. Is she mad? She's scared. Mr. Chen rubbed his face. Naomi, I need you to understand something. What you did today, standing up like that, speaking truth. It was brave. It was right. But the world doesn't always reward people for being right. Sometimes it punishes them. I know. I don't think you do. He leaned forward, his voice intense. Damon Cross is worth an estimated $400 million. His label, Apex Records, is worth billions. You just cost them everything. Their flagship artist, their credibility, probably their stock price. These are people with resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who bill thousands of dollars an hour, PR firms that specialize in destroying reputations. They're not going to just accept this. What do you think they'll do? Mr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. I think they'll try to make you the villain, paint you as a troubled kid seeking attention, dig into your family's finances, your school records, anything they can twist. And if that doesn't work, he stopped himself. What? If that doesn't work, they'll try to buy you. Offer your mother money to sign something saying you made a mistake, that you misheard, that you're sorry. They'll make it life-changing money, the kind that pays off debt and buys a house and sends you to a good college. Naomi stared at him. We wouldn't. You're 11 years old and your mother works 2 jobs, Mr. Chen said gently. I'm not judging. I'm telling you what's coming so you're prepared. Because whatever you and your family decide, it needs to be your choice. Not something forced on you, not something you do because you're scared or pressured or exhausted. Headlights swept across the parking lot. Teresa's ancient Honda, the one that needed a new transmission and burned oil and had a passenger door that didn't lock, pulled up next to the bus. Mr. Chen stood. "I meant what I said. You were brave today. Don't let anyone take that from you." Naomi descended the bus steps on shaking legs. Her mother was already out of the car, moving toward her with an expression Naomi had seen only a handful of times. When the landlord had threatened eviction, when the hospital had called about her grandmother, when Teresa had realized she'd be raising her daughter alone. Terror, mixed with fierce protective love. Teresa wrapped Naomi in her arms, holding so tight it hurt. "Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you? Tell me you're okay." "I'm okay, Mama. I promise." Teresa pulled back, examining Naomi's face like she might find invisible wounds. "I saw it. The video. Someone at work showed me on their phone. I saw that man grab your arm." Mr. Chen stopped him. "It's fine." "It's not fine." Teresa's voice cracked. "Baby, do you understand what you did? Do you know who you challenged? I just asked him to sing. You exposed him, on camera, in front of millions of people." Teresa's hands trembled as she smoothed Naomi's hair. "And now, Naomi, there are already reporters calling the school. Someone found our address. There's a news van parked on our street." Naomi felt the ground tilt. "What?" "We can't go home. Not right now. I called your Aunt Jackie. We're staying with her tonight until I figure out what to do." They got in the car. Teresa drove in silence for several blocks, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the wheel too hard. Finally, she spoke. "I'm proud of you. I need you to know that first. What you did, standing up, telling the truth, I'm so proud I could burst, but I'm also terrified, because I know how this works. Powerful people don't lose gracefully, and we don't have the resources to fight them. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't cause anything. He did. By lying. By stealing other people's voices. By being so arrogant he thought he could humiliate a child and get away with it." Teresa's voice hardened. "But meaning well doesn't protect us. Being right doesn't protect us. We're poor, baby. We're black. We're invisible until we're inconvenient, and then we're targets." They drove to Aunt Jackie's apartment across town, a slightly better neighborhood, a slightly less broken building. Jackie met them at the door, pulled them both inside, and immediately locked the deadbolt behind them. "Phone's off," Jackie said. She was Teresa's older sister, worked as a paralegal, had the kind of sharp survival instincts that came from years navigating systems designed to chew people up. "Both of you, right now. If they're tracking calls or trying to find you, we're not making it easy." Naomi powered down her phone, the cheap prepaid model that barely worked anyway. Teresa did the same. Jackie had the news on. A cable network, running the footage on loop with a banner that read, "Child prodigy exposes pop star's lip sync scandal." A panel of commentators debated the implications. An entertainment lawyer explained NDAs and fraud claims. A music critic called it the most significant expose since Milli Vanilli. None of them mentioned Naomi's name yet, but they showed her face, over and over, that moment when she'd stood alone in the spotlight and sung the note Damon Cross couldn't touch. "Turn it off," Teresa said. "They need to see what's happening." "I said turn it off," Jackie complied. The sudden silence felt oppressive. Naomi sat on the couch, still wearing the blouse, still careful not to damage it further. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Anything, baby." "If they offer us money, a lot of money, to say I was wrong, would you want me to take it?" Teresa's face went through several emotions in quick succession. Then she sat down beside Naomi, took her hands, and spoke with the careful precision of someone choosing the most important words of her life. "If someone offered us enough money to change our lives, to move out of that apartment, to stop me from working 2 jobs, to send you to a school with a real music program, I would be tempted. I won't lie about that. I would think about saying yes because I love you, and I'm tired, and sometimes the world makes you so exhausted you just want to stop fighting." She cupped Naomi's face. "But then I'd remember that I'm raising a daughter who believed truth mattered more than comfort, who stood in front of millions of people and refused to be complicit in a lie. And I'd ask myself what kind of mother I'd be if I taught her that courage only matters when it's convenient, that integrity has a price tag, that powerful men can buy their way out of consequences as long as they pay enough. Tears streaked Teresa's cheeks. So no, baby. If they offer us money to make you say you were wrong, we turn it down. We keep our dignity. We trust that somehow, some way, the truth will protect us even when it feels like it won't. Jackie muttered, "That's a beautiful speech, T, but dignity doesn't pay rent." "Then we'll figure out rent another way." Teresa's voice was steel. "My daughter's not for sale." They spent that night on Jackie's pull-out couch, Naomi pressed against her mother's side, neither of them sleeping much. Every car that passed outside made them tense. Every distant siren felt like it was coming for them. Around 3 in the morning, Jackie's landline rang. She answered, listened, then handed it to Teresa. "It's someone named Vanessa Reed. Says she's a lawyer. Says she needs to talk to you about Naomi." Teresa took the phone with visible reluctance. "Hello?" Naomi couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched her mother's expression shift from suspicion to surprise to something that might have been hope. "Why would you do that?" Teresa asked. Then, after a long pause, "No, we can't afford—" Another pause. "Pro bono? I don't understand. You don't know us." Teresa listened for several more minutes, then quietly, "Okay. Yes. Tomorrow morning. Thank you." She hung up, looked at Jackie, then at Naomi. That was Vanessa Reed. She's an entertainment attorney. Big firm, represents major artists. She saw the footage. She says Damon Cross and Apex Records are going to come after us hard. Lawsuits, harassment, smear campaigns, and she wants to represent us for free. "Why?" Naomi asked. She said, Teresa's voice caught. She said 20 years ago she was a session singer, and she signed one of those NDAs. Let a producer take credit for her work because she needed the money and didn't think she had a choice. She spent her whole career watching it happen to other people and staying quiet because that's how the industry works. But she's not staying quiet anymore. She says if we're willing to fight, she'll make sure we have the resources to do it right." Jackie crossed her arms. "And you believe her?" "I don't know. But she knew things, specific things about how these cases work, what Damon's team will try. She sounded legitimate, and right now she's the only person offering help instead of threats." They met Vanessa Reed the next morning at a coffee shop in a neighborhood none of them could usually afford to visit. Vanessa was black, mid-40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Teresa made in a month. She had the kind of presence that made people notice, not loud, but absolutely certain. She shook Teresa's hand, then Naomi's. "Thank you for meeting me. I know you have no reason to trust me, so I'll be direct. Damon Cross's legal team filed papers last night. They're suing you for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with business relations." Teresa's face went pale. "We can't afford—" "They're not expecting you to fight," Vanessa interrupted. "They're expecting you to panic, to realize you're drowning, and to accept whatever settlement they offer, probably something that includes a gag order, a forced apology, and Naomi disappearing from public view." "How much are they suing for?" Teresa whispered. $5 million. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. $5 million. More money than their family would see in 10 lifetimes. The kind of debt that didn't just ruin you, it erased you. Naomi watched her mother's face crumble, watched the fierce protectiveness from last night dissolve into cold terror. "I can't. We can't." Teresa couldn't even finish the sentence. Vanessa reached across the table and gripped Teresa's hand. "Listen to me. They will lose this case. Naomi told the truth. She asked Damon to sing, and he failed. That's not defamation. That's documentation of a fact. The lawsuit is intimidation, not justice. It's designed to break you before you ever see a courtroom. Then why file it? Because most people can't afford to find out it's toothless. Most people settle, sign the papers, take the money, and the silence." Vanessa leaned back. "But you're not going to do that. Because I'm going to represent you, and I'm going to make this lawsuit so expensive and public and legally risky for Damon Cross that his own lawyers will beg him to drop it." "Why?" Naomi asked. "Why would you do this for free?" Vanessa looked at her, really looked at her, the way adults rarely looked at kids, like she was a person, not a problem. Because when I was 22, I sang background vocals on a track that went triple platinum. The artist who took credit never acknowledged me, never paid me fairly. And when I tried to speak up, I was told I should be grateful for the opportunity, that I was replaceable, that if I made trouble, I'd never work again. Vanessa's jaw tightened, so I stayed quiet. Went to law school, built a career representing the same kind of artists who'd silenced me. And I told myself it was practical, strategic, the smart play. She pulled out her phone, showed them a screenshot of Naomi on stage, standing beside Talia Monroe, singing that impossible note. Then I saw an 11-year-old girl do what I couldn't, refuse to be complicit, refuse to fail quietly. And I realized I'd been failing quietly my entire career. Vanessa's voice went soft. So I'm not asking you to let me represent you. I'm asking you to let me stop failing. Teresa looked at Naomi. Naomi looked back. An entire conversation happened in that glance. Fear, hope, exhaustion, determination. Okay, Teresa said. What do we do? First, we file a response to their lawsuit. We deny everything and we countersue for abuse of process. Second, we go public. We don't hide. We don't apologize. We tell your story, the truth, and we let people decide who they believe. Third, we find the other singers. Talia Monroe's already speaking up. There are more. We build a case that this isn't about one girl and one question. It's about an entire system of fraud that Damon Cross and Apex Records have profited from for decades. And if we lose? Teresa asked. If we lose, you declare bankruptcy and the judgment becomes uncollectible. You'll have bad credit, but you won't go to prison. You won't lose Naomi. And you'll still have told the truth. Vanessa met Teresa's eyes. But we're not going to lose, because I'm very good at my job, and Damon Cross just picked a fight with the wrong family. Over the next 48 hours, the world went insane. Talia Monroe released the full contracts online, NDAs, payment records, email chains showing Apex Records executives coordinating the cover-up. 3 more session singers came forward with similar stories. A vocal coach admitted he'd been teaching Damon to lip-sync convincingly for years. Audio engineers posted anonymously about the extensive editing required to make Damon's studio recordings sound remotely like his live performances. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. But Damon's team fought back with a coordinated assault that made Teresa's warnings look gentle. First came the character assassination. Articles appeared, carefully sourced to anonymous insiders, claiming Naomi was a troubled student with behavioral problems, that Teresa was a fame-hungry mother exploiting her child, that the whole confrontation had been staged for attention. Then the doxing started. Their address appeared on hostile forums, photos of their apartment building, their car, Teresa's workplace. Strangers showed up at Washington Heights Middle, demanding to see Naomi, shouting questions, filming everything. The school board called an emergency meeting. The principal, a tired man named Dr. Morrison, who'd been looking for an excuse to cut the underfunded music program for years, suggested placing Naomi on temporary leave for her own safety and the safety of other students. Mr. Chen fought back. You want to punish her for telling the truth? I want to protect this school from becoming a circus, Morrison snapped. We have reporters in the parking lot. Parents are complaining. This is a distraction we cannot afford. She has a scholarship. You can't just... The scholarship has a conduct clause. If her presence creates a disruptive environment... She sang a note. That's not misconduct. That's a... Enough. Morrison's voice went cold. The board will vote Thursday. Until then, Naomi Brooks is not to attend classes. Vanessa immediately filed an injunction, but the damage was done. Naomi, sitting in Jackie's apartment while her mother worked double shifts to make up for the hours lost dealing with lawyers and reporters, felt the walls closing in. This was the cost of truth. Not martyrdom, not glory, just slow, methodical destruction of everything you'd built and everyone you loved. On the third night, someone threw a brick through Jackie's window. The note wrapped around it read, "Go back to where you belong." They called the police. The officer who responded took a statement with visible boredom, suggested they avoid antagonizing people online, and left without filing a report. Jackie stared at the shattered glass. Maybe we should take the settlement. Maybe this isn't worth it. No. Naomi's voice was small but certain. We can't. Baby, they're trying to hurt us. I know, but if we stop now, everyone who's scared, all those other singers who signed NDAs, all the kids who see powerful people lie and get away with it, they'll learn that the truth doesn't matter if you're rich enough to bury it. Teresa pulled Naomi close. You shouldn't have to carry this. You're 11. I didn't ask to carry it, Naomi said. But I did ask him to sing, and he couldn't. That's not my fault. That's his. The next morning, Vanessa called with news that changed everything. The court denied Damon's injunction to silence Talia Monroe, and the judge included a statement in the ruling. She said the evidence of fraud is substantial enough to warrant criminal investigation. The state attorney general's office just announced they're opening a case against Apex Records for racketeering and fraud. Teresa's hands shook on the phone. What does that mean? It means Damon's not just facing a defamation lawsuit anymore. He's facing potential criminal charges. It means the pressure just shifted from you to him, and it means we've got leverage. But Damon Cross, backed into a corner, didn't surrender. He doubled down. In a press conference covered by every major network, flanked by lawyers and looking appropriately contrite, Damon admitted to using vocal support on some recordings, but insisted the live performances had always been genuine. He claimed Naomi had misunderstood what she'd heard, that his voice had been strained that night from a respiratory infection, and that the whole controversy was a tragic misunderstanding blown out of proportion by opportunistic lawyers. Then he turned to the camera and spoke directly to Naomi. I understand you're a talented young girl. I understand you love music. I don't blame you for what happened. You were nervous, confused, caught up in a moment you didn't understand. I want to help you. I want to offer you and your family a full scholarship to the Berklee College of Music, a trust fund for your education, and support to develop your gift the right way. All I ask is that we sit down together, clarify what really happened that night, and move forward with mutual respect. It was brilliant, magnanimous. It painted him as the gracious adult extending a hand to a confused child, and it put a price tag on Naomi's silence that would change her family's entire future. Vanessa called 30 seconds after the press conference ended. Do not respond. Do not comment. Let me handle this. But the offer was already everywhere. The narrative had shifted from brave girl exposes fraud to troubled family could have their dreams funded if they just admit the mistake. Opinion pieces appeared. Why was Naomi's family refusing help? What kind of mother turned down a college education for her child? Wasn't this just proving Damon's version, that it was all a misunderstanding and everyone should move on? Teresa sat at Jackie's kitchen table, her head in her hands, and asked the question that had been building for days. What if we're wrong? What if we're destroying our lives over something that doesn't matter to anyone but us? Naomi didn't answer immediately. She thought about that moment on stage, about Damon's voice cracking, about the way he'd grabbed her arm, about Talia Monroe, stepping forward after years of silence, finally claiming her own voice. It matters, Naomi said quietly, even if nobody else cares, even if we lose everything. It matters that we didn't lie. Teresa looked at her daughter, this small, fierce person who'd somehow grown old before her time, and made the decision that would define both their lives. Okay, Teresa whispered, then we don't take the deal. We go to court, and we trust that somehow truth is worth more than money. The lawsuit was scheduled for the following Monday. Naomi had 5 days to prepare for the moment when she'd have to stand in front of a judge and prove that she'd heard what everyone wanted to deny. 5 days before Damon Cross's lawyers would try to destroy an 11-year-old girl for the crime of having perfect pitch and refusing to fail quietly. 5 days before the world would learn whether justice was real or just another comfortable lie. The courthouse steps were packed with cameras. Naomi held her mother's hand tight enough to hurt, her other hand gripping the strap of a backpack that contained nothing but a notebook, a pencil, and the blouse she'd worn on stage, cleaned, pressed, price tag carefully removed and stored in a plastic bag as evidence they'd planned to return it. Vanessa had insisted on keeping it. Physical proof, she'd said, of who Naomi really was versus who Damon's lawyers would try to paint her as. Eyes forward, Vanessa murmured as they climbed the steps. Don't respond to questions. Don't react to anything they shout. We walk in with dignity. But dignity was hard to maintain when reporters screamed over each other, when cameras flashed like strobe lights, when strangers yelled things that ranged from supportive to vicious. Someone held a sign that read, "Naomi speaks truth." Someone else's sign said, "Gold digger family destroys innocent artist." Teresa's grip on Naomi's hand tightened. They pushed through the crowd, Vanessa running interference with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times, until they finally reached the courthouse doors and the blessed quiet of marble halls and security checkpoints. Inside, the building felt like a cathedral. High ceilings, polished floors, the weight of justice carved into every architectural detail. Naomi had never been inside a courthouse before. She'd imagined something from television, dramatic and immediate. Instead, it was just rooms and hallways and people in expensive suits walking too fast, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than her mother's car. Vanessa led them to a small conference room. "We have 30 minutes before we're called. I need to go over this one more time." She spread papers across the table, depositions, affidavits, technical analyses of the Orpheum recording. The evidence was overwhelming, but Vanessa's expression remained tense. "Damon's team is going to attack your credibility. They'll question your age, your training, your ability to accurately identify pitch under pressure. They'll suggest you were coached, that you had ulterior motives, that this whole thing was orchestrated for attention." Vanessa looked directly at Naomi. "They're going to try to make you doubt yourself, to make you seem like a child who got confused and is now too stubborn or too controlled by adults to admit it." "I know what I heard," Naomi said quietly. "I believe you. The evidence supports you, but belief and evidence don't always win in court. What wins is who tells the most convincing story." Vanessa softened slightly. "So when they ask you questions, keep your answers simple, yes or no when possible. Don't elaborate unless I signal you to. Don't let them make you angry. And Naomi," she paused, "remember that telling the truth doesn't require you to be perfect. It just requires you to be honest." A knock at the door. A bailiff poked his head in. "Judge Carolyn Westbrook is ready. Courtroom 3. They walked through corridors that seemed designed to make people feel small, past other families waiting for their own moments of judgment, until they reached a set of heavy wooden doors. Vanessa pushed them open. The courtroom was smaller than Naomi expected, but somehow more intimidating. Rows of wooden benches, half filled with reporters, legal observers, and people Naomi didn't recognize. The judge's bench, elevated and imposing. The witness stand, isolated and exposed. And on the other side of the room, a table where 3 lawyers sat in matching navy suits, their expressions carefully neutral. Behind them, Damon Cross. He looked different than he had on stage, smaller, more human. He wore a charcoal suit with a muted tie, his hair styled but not overly so, his expression one of patient suffering, the image of a man bearing false accusations with grace. When his eyes met Naomi's across the courtroom, he smiled, gentle, forgiving. It made her skin crawl. Judge Westbrook was a black woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard every lie the legal system had to offer and wasn't impressed by any of them. She reviewed her notes, then looked up. "We're here on an emergency motion filed by Mr. Cross's legal team requesting a preliminary injunction to halt further defamatory statements by the defendant, Naomi Brooks, and her representatives, pending resolution of the underlying defamation suit. Additionally, Mr. Cross is seeking a court order requiring the defendant to issue a public retraction and apology." She looked over her glasses. "This is highly unusual, counselors. Preliminary injunctions in defamation cases are rarely granted. You'd better have substantial arguments." Damon's lead attorney stood. His name was Marcus Pemberton, and Vanessa had warned Naomi about him. 40 years of experience, a reputation for destroying witnesses on cross-examination. The kind of lawyer who could make truth sound like fiction and fiction sound like gospel. "Your Honor, we're not here to silence a child. We're here to protect Mr. Cross from an orchestrated campaign of character assassination that has already cost him sponsorships, performance opportunities, and his reputation built over 18 years of documented excellence." Pemberton's voice was smooth, reasonable. The defendant made specific, demonstrably false claims in a public forum. She stated that Mr. Cross cannot sing the high C in his signature song, Gravity. This is objectively untrue. We have 18 years of live performances, recordings, and expert testimony from vocal coaches confirming his ability. And yet, Judge Westbrook interrupted, there's video evidence from the Orpheum Theater showing him attempting and failing to sing that exact note, under optimal conditions, at his own request. Your Honor, Mr. Cross was suffering from acute laryngitis that evening, a fact confirmed by his physician. He attempted the performance against medical advice as an act of generosity toward the student choir. The defendant exploited his temporary vocal impairment to make sweeping claims about his entire career. Pemberton gestured to a stack of binders. We have documentation here of Mr. Cross's vocal capabilities across nearly 2 decades. What we have from the defendant is one moment, taken out of context, amplified by social media, and weaponized by opportunistic lawyers seeking to profit from his suffering. Vanessa stood. Your Honor, if I may, the defendant didn't take anything out of context. She asked a simple question. Can you sing this note? Mr. Cross chose to accept that challenge in front of millions of witnesses. He failed. That's not defamation. That's documentation of observable reality. Observed by an 11-year-old with no professional credentials, no formal training in vocal analysis, and as we'll demonstrate, a history of behavioral issues and attention-seeking behavior that calls her entire testimony into question. Pemberton's tone remained pleasant, but the accusation landed like a slap. Teresa half rose from her seat. Vanessa put a hand on her shoulder, pressing her back down. Judge Westbrook's expression hardened. Counselor, if you're about to argue that a child's credibility should be judged by her family's economic status or her school's disciplinary records, I suggest you reconsider your approach. This is a court of law, not a tabloid. Of course, Your Honor. I'm simply establishing that the defendant lacks the expertise to make the claims she's made and that her motivations may not be as pure as her representatives suggest. Then let's test that, shall we? Judge Westbrook looked at Vanessa. Ms. Reed, your client claims perfect pitch, claims she can identify notes with accuracy that would substantiate her challenge to Mr. Cross. I assume you're prepared to demonstrate this? We are, Your Honor. And Mr. Pemberton, you're claiming that Mr. Cross's vocal abilities have been misrepresented. I assume you're prepared to have him demonstrate those abilities? Pemberton hesitated, just for a second. Your Honor, this is a legal proceeding, not a talent competition. Mr. Cross's medical condition. Counselor, you've spent the last 10 minutes arguing that your client's reputation rests on his proven vocal ability. You've submitted nearly 2 decades of performances as evidence. But the central question here is simple. Can he or can he not sing the note in question? Judge Westbrook leaned forward. Because if he can, this case is frivolous, and Ms. Brooks should indeed be sanctioned. But if he cannot, then her statement was factual, and you're wasting this court's time with a slap suit designed to intimidate a child into silence. The courtroom went very quiet. Pemberton glanced at Damon. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Pemberton straightened. Your Honor, with respect, requiring my client to perform on demand in a courtroom is the simplest way to resolve this matter, Judge Westbrook finished. I'm not asking for a concert. I'm asking for proof of capability. If Mr. Cross can sing a high C right now in this room without studio production or backing tracks, then we'll proceed with examining whether Ms. Brooks's claim was made with malicious intent. If he cannot, we'll proceed with examining why he's suing a 6th grader for accurately describing his limitations. Damon leaned forward and whispered something to Pemberton. Pemberton's jaw tightened. Your Honor, my client's physician has advised against any vocal strain, then withdraw the suit, Vanessa interjected. If Mr. Cross cannot demonstrate the capability he's suing to protect, he has no case. That's not how defamation law works. It is when the alleged defamatory statement is a claim of observable fact. Vanessa's voice cut like a scalpel. Mr. Cross has built his entire legal argument on the premise that Naomi lied about his vocal ability. Proving that lie requires proving he possesses the ability she claimed he lacks. The burden of proof is on him. Judge Westbrook nodded slowly. I'm inclined to agree. Mr. Pemberton, I'm going to give you a choice. Either Mr. Cross demonstrates his vocal ability here and now, or I'm dismissing this injunction and seriously considering sanctions for filing a frivolous lawsuit designed to silence a minor." Pemberton looked like he'd swallowed glass. He conferred quietly with his team, then with Damon. The whispered conversation grew heated. Finally, Damon stood. "I'll sing," he said. His voice carried across the courtroom. Strong, clear, the voice of a man who'd addressed stadiums. "I'll prove that I can do what this child claims I cannot." Judge Westbrook gestured to the witness stand. "Then please, Mr. Cross, show us." Damon walked to the stand with the confidence of someone who'd spent 18 years performing for millions. He adjusted the microphone, unnecessary in the small courtroom, but a gesture so automatic he probably didn't realize he'd done it, and looked directly at Naomi. "I don't blame you," he said, his voice gentle, magnanimous. "You're young. You heard something that confused you. You got caught up in a moment. I forgive you, and after I sing this note, I hope you'll find the courage to admit your mistake so we can all move forward." Naomi said nothing, just met his eyes with the steady gaze of someone who knew exactly what she'd heard and wasn't backing down. Damon took a breath, visibly prepared himself, and sang. His voice was good. Even now, even angry and cornered and stripped of all his technological safety nets, it was technically proficient. He had training, control, the muscle memory of someone who'd spent years learning to use his instrument. But when he reached for the high C, when he pushed for that note that had supposedly defined his career, his voice cracked. Not dramatically, not the catastrophic failure from the Orpheum stage. This was subtler, a waver, a strain. The sound of someone reaching for something just beyond their grasp and coming up short. He held it for maybe 5 seconds before his voice broke entirely. The courtroom sat in absolute silence. Damon lowered the microphone. His face had gone red. From exertion or humiliation, Naomi couldn't tell. "I told you, laryngitis, medical condition. This proves nothing." Judge Westbrook looked at Naomi. "Ms. Brooks, can you identify the note Mr. Cross just attempted?" Naomi stood. Her legs shook, but her voice was steady. "He reached B flat. The note in gravity is C. That's a full step difference." "And you can sing the correct note?" "Yes, ma'am." "Please demonstrate." Naomi walked to the witness stand. No preparation, no microphone adjustment, no deep breath or visible steeling of nerves. She simply opened her mouth and sang. The high C filled the courtroom, pure, sustained, effortless. She held it for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Not straining, not struggling, just proving with absolute clarity that the note Damon Cross had built his legend on was completely within reach of an 11-year-old girl with natural talent and nothing to prove except the truth. When she finished, the silence was different, heavier, loaded with the weight of undeniable reality. Judge Westbrook removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Mr. Pemberton, does your client still wish to proceed with this injunction?" Pemberton looked at Damon. Damon's expression had shifted from confident to cornered. The careful mask of the gracious artist had cracked, revealing something uglier underneath. The face of a man who'd spent nearly 2 decades lying and had finally run out of places to hide. "Your Honor," Pemberton said stiffly, "we'd like to request a brief recess to consult with our client." "Denied. You brought this emergency motion. You demanded immediate action. You accused an 11-year-old girl of defamation and character assassination. The least you can do is finish what you started." Judge Westbrook's voice could have cut steel. "So I'll ask again. Does Mr. Cross wish to proceed?" Damon stood abruptly. "This is a setup. You brought us here to humiliate me. Mr. Cross, you brought yourself here by filing a lawsuit claiming Ms. Brooks lied about your vocal abilities. She didn't lie. You demonstrably cannot sing the note she identified. That's not humiliation. That's consequence." Judge Westbrook shuffled her papers. "Motion for preliminary injunction is denied. Furthermore, I'm issuing a ruling that Ms. Brooks's statements about Mr. Cross's vocal limitations are protected speech, factual observations made in good faith without malicious intent. Any further legal action against her or her family on these grounds will be considered harassment and subject to sanctions." Pemberton tried one last time. "Your Honor, the underlying defamation suit still..." Will be dismissed with prejudice if you don't withdraw it voluntarily in the next 48 hours, Judge Westbrook finished. I'm also ordering Mr. Cross to pay Ms. Brooks' legal fees incurred in defending against this frivolous action. Consider yourselves fortunate I'm not referring this to the Bar Association for disciplinary review. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters rushing for the doors, phones appearing despite the bailiff's protests, Damon's legal team forming a protective circle around him as he tried to leave. Vanessa grabbed Naomi and Teresa, steering them toward a side exit. Don't stop. Don't comment. Straight to the car. They made it outside through a service entrance, avoiding the main courthouse steps and the media circus. Vanessa's car was parked in a garage across the street. They ran for it, got inside, locked the doors. Only then did Teresa start crying. Not sad tears. The shaking, gasping kind that came from months of terror finally releasing. Vanessa handed her tissues. Naomi sat in the back seat, numb, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline of singing in front of the judge. Is it over? Teresa asked through her tears. Please tell me it's over. The lawsuit's dead, the injunction's denied. Legally, you're safe. Vanessa started the car, pulled out of the garage. But the other part, the public part, that's just beginning. She was right. By the time they reached Jackie's apartment, the video was everywhere. Someone had recorded the courtroom proceedings on a hidden phone. The footage was shaky, the audio imperfect, but it captured everything. Damon's failed attempt, Naomi's perfect note, Judge Westbrook's scathing dismissal. The narrative that Damon's publicists had carefully constructed, confused child, opportunistic lawyers, innocent artist, collapsed in real time. Now the story was different. Fraud exposed, truth vindicated, powerful man brought low by a kid with perfect pitch and the courage to use it. Sponsors started dropping him within hours. Concert venues canceled tours. Apex Records issued a terse statement about conducting an internal review. The state attorney general announced an expansion of their criminal investigation. And the session singers, emboldened by Talia Monroe's courage and Naomi's vindication, came forward in force. Not just the 6 Vanessa had found. Dozens. A chorus of stolen voices finally claiming their own songs. That night, Naomi sat on Jackie's couch watching the news coverage with a strange sense of disconnection. This was her story, her life, her voice, but it felt like watching something happen to someone else. A narrative that had grown too big to belong to just one 11-year-old girl anymore. Teresa sat beside her, no longer crying, but not exactly celebrating either. You did it, baby. You won. I just told the truth. You did more than that. You changed things. Those other singers, they're speaking up because you showed them it was possible. Naomi thought about Talia Monroe, about the vocal coach who'd admitted training Damon to lip sync, about all the people who'd been complicit in the lie, who'd stayed silent because silence was easier and truth was expensive. Mama, do you think he knew? Mr. Cross, do you think he knew he wasn't good enough, or did he believe his own lie? Teresa was quiet for a long time. I think he knew. And I think that's why he fought so hard. Because admitting it would mean admitting that everything he'd built, the fame, the money, the legend, it was all stolen. And people will do terrible things to avoid facing that kind of truth about themselves. Do you think he'll go to jail? I don't know. Probably not. Rich people rarely do. But he'll lose everything that mattered to him, the respect, the worship, the image. And maybe that's worse for someone like him. Naomi wasn't sure she believed that. She'd seen what poverty did, what it cost to count pennies and return blouses and ride buses that never came on time. She'd seen her mother's hands, rough from scrubbing other people's floors. The idea that public humiliation hurt more than actual consequences felt like something only people with money believed. But she didn't argue. She was too tired. Her phone buzzed, the cheap prepaid that barely worked, a text from a number she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it, assuming it was another journalist or troll or stranger with opinions. Then she read the message. This is Talia. Thank you. Not just for what you did in court, for what you did on that stage, for asking the question everyone else was too scared to ask. You gave me my voice back. I won't waste it. Naomi showed her mother. Teresa read it, smiled, kissed Naomi's forehead. See? You did change things. Another text came through, then another. More session singers. People Naomi had never met, whose voices had been stolen and silenced, reaching out to thank a sixth grader for refusing to be complicit in the machinery of theft. Vanessa called around 10 that night. Turn on channel 7, you need to see this. Naomi found the remote, switched channels. A news anchor was reading from a statement, images of Damon Cross scrolling behind him. In a stunning development, Apex Records has announced they're terminating their relationship with Damon Cross, effective immediately. All of his albums will be removed from streaming services pending a complete audit of vocal authenticity. The label is also facing a class action lawsuit from consumers demanding refunds for what they're calling fraudulent products. Legal experts estimate the total liability could exceed $200 million. The anchor continued, but Naomi stopped listening. $200 million, an amount so large it didn't even feel real. The entire economic engine that had sustained Damon Cross's empire dismantled in less than a week because one girl had asked him to sing. Teresa turned off the television. That's enough for tonight. You need to sleep. But sleep felt impossible. Naomi lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through everything that had happened. The Orpheum stage, the courtroom, the moment when Damon's voice had cracked and the lie had finally broken open. She thought about the blouse, still in its evidence bag in Vanessa's office. About the price tag her mother had carefully preserved. About the $10.47 that had represented the difference between eating and not eating that week. She thought about all the small humiliations of poverty. The way people looked at you when you paid in food stamps. The embarrassment of free lunch tickets. The constant calculation of what you could afford and what you couldn't. And she thought about how Damon Cross had probably never counted pennies in his life, had never had to choose between dignity and survival. But he'd still been desperate enough to steal, to lie, to build an empire on other people's voices and then try to destroy anyone who threatened to expose him. Maybe that was the real lesson, that theft didn't require poverty. That some people stole not because they needed to survive, but because they wanted more than they'd earned and didn't care who they hurt to get it. Naomi finally fell asleep around midnight, her dreams full of spotlights and shattered glass, and a note that climbed higher than any human voice had a right to reach. When she woke the next morning, the world had shifted again. Damon Cross had posted a statement, not an apology exactly, but an acknowledgement. He admitted to vocal support on his recordings, claimed he'd never meant to deceive anyone, said he was stepping away from public life to reflect and heal. It was carefully worded, legally vetted, and utterly hollow. But it was the closest thing to a confession anyone was going to get. Talia Monroe appeared on morning shows, talking about her experience, about the culture of silence in the music industry, about the need for transparency and credit. She was poised, articulate, and finally able to claim the songs she'd sung. Other artists started coming forward, not just session singers, but established performers who'd been pressured to lip sync, to use auto-tune, to maintain impossible standards of perfection that required technological fraud to sustain. The conversation was expanding beyond Damon Cross into a broader reckoning about authenticity in an industry built on manufactured image. And somehow, at the center of it all, was Naomi Brooks, a sixth grader who just wanted to sing in her school choir and had accidentally become the catalyst for an industry-wide reckoning. Vanessa called again that afternoon. I need to talk to you and your mother in person. Can you come to my office? They met downtown in a glass tower that made Jackie's apartment building look like a dollhouse. Vanessa's office was on the 30th floor, all windows and polished wood, and the kind of quiet that came from thick carpets and expensive soundproofing. She sat them down, spread papers across her desk. I've been contacted by 4 different record labels. They all want to sign Naomi, offer her a development deal, production budget, professional training. The offers start at $500,000. Teresa's face went pale. $500,000? That's the lowest offer. The highest is $2 million, plus points on any albums produced. Vanessa looked at Naomi. You're 11 years old, and you're the most famous voice in America right now. These labels see dollar signs. They see the next big thing. They want to capitalize on your moment. What do you think we should do? Teresa asked. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. Honestly, I think you should turn them all down. The words hung in the air like a challenge. You just said $2 million? Teresa stammered. I know what I said, and I know what that money could mean for you. But I also know how this industry works. They'll sign her to a contract that gives them control of her image, her voice, her career. They'll push her into the same machinery that created Damon Cross. Studio production, manufactured perfection, impossible standards. And the moment she stops being profitable or convenient, they'll discard her. Vanessa's expression was fierce. Naomi didn't expose a fraud just to become part of the same system. She deserves better. Then what do we do? Naomi asked quietly. Vanessa smiled, the first genuine smile Naomi had seen from her. We build something different. There's an independent label, Veritas Records, run by people who actually care about artistic integrity. Small operation, but they're offering a deal that would give you creative control, ownership of your masters, and protection from exactly the kind of exploitation that destroyed those session singers. The money's less, $50,000 up front, but it's clean, and it's yours. $50,000. Still more money than Naomi's family had ever had. Still life-changing. But a fraction of what the major labels were offering. Teresa looked at Naomi. It's your choice, baby. Your voice, your future. Naomi thought about the Orpheum stage, about standing in front of millions of people and choosing truth over comfort, about Talia Monroe finally claiming her songs after years of silence. I want the independent deal, Naomi said. I want to own my voice. Vanessa's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. They signed the papers that afternoon, Teresa as legal guardian, Vanessa as representation. The Veritas Records team on video call explaining every clause, every protection, every promise. It felt real in a way the major label offers hadn't. Less flash, more substance. When they left Vanessa's office, the sun was setting over the city, painting the glass towers gold. Naomi stood on the sidewalk, her mother's hand in hers, and looked up at the sky. Mama, are we going to be okay? Teresa squeezed her hand. Yeah, baby, I think we are. For the first time in a long time, I think we're going to be just fine. They went back to Jackie's apartment, not home yet, but getting closer. The reporters had finally dispersed. The death threats had slowed. The brick through the window had been replaced with actual glass instead of cardboard and duct tape. And that night, Naomi opened her notebook, the one she'd carried to the courthouse, and wrote down everything she remembered. Every note, every word, every moment when she'd had to choose between truth and safety. She wrote it not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to remember. Wanted to preserve the story before it got polished and simplified and turned into something easier to digest than the messy, terrifying, beautiful reality of what had actually happened. She wrote until her hand cramped, until her mother called her to bed, until the words finally ran out and all that remained was the truth, captured in ink, impossible to erase or revise or steal. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse Damon Cross could no longer afford, a man who'd spent 18 years running from the truth finally sat alone with nothing left to hide behind. The machine had broken. The lie had died. And an 11-year-old girl with perfect pitch had proven that sometimes the smallest voice could shatter the biggest fraud. All she'd had to do was refuse to fail quietly. 3 weeks after the courthouse victory, Naomi walked back through the doors of Washington Heights Middle School for the first time since the world had turned upside down. The hallway felt both familiar and alien. Same scuffed linoleum, same dented lockers, same smell of cafeteria food and floor cleaner. But the students who filled that hallway looked at her differently now, some with awe, some with envy. A few with the particular resentment reserved for people who'd escaped the invisible boundaries that were supposed to keep everyone in their place. Destiny found her at her locker, threw her arms around her neck. Oh my God, you're actually back. I thought maybe you'd transferred to some fancy private school or something. We can't afford fancy private school, Naomi said, but she was smiling. Besides, I like it here. Girl, you're famous. You took down Damon Cross. You've got a record deal. You could go anywhere. I know. I chose here. It was true. Vanessa had floated the idea of using some of the Veritas records advanced to transfer Naomi to a performing arts academy, somewhere with better resources and professional training. Teresa had left the choice entirely to Naomi, and Naomi had chosen Washington Heights Middle, with its underfunded music program and overcrowded classrooms and teachers who worked second jobs just to make rent. She'd chosen it because Mr. Chen was here, because destiny was here, because this was the place that had given her a chance when nobody else would, and leaving felt like abandoning the people who'd believed in her before the world decided she mattered. The morning passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sidelong glances. Most teachers treated her normally, but a few seemed uncomfortable, like they didn't know whether to acknowledge what had happened or pretend everything was the same as it had always been. Mrs. Patterson, her math teacher, pulled her aside after class. "I saw what you did, what you went through." Mrs. Patterson's voice was quiet, careful. "I want you to know you were brave, and if you ever need anything, if this gets to be too much, my door is always open." "Thank you," Naomi said, surprised by the sudden thickness in her throat. "I mean it. What they did to you, the lawsuit, the threats, trying to destroy your family, that wasn't right. And the fact that you stood your ground." Mrs. Patterson's eyes glistened. "My daughter's your age. I hope if she's ever faced with that kind of choice, she has half your courage." Lunch was harder. The cafeteria felt like walking onto a stage, hundreds of eyes tracking her movement as she got her tray, found a seat with Destiny and a few other choir kids. The noise level dropped noticeably when she sat down, conversations pausing as people craned to look. "Ignore them," Destiny muttered. "They'll get bored eventually." But before Naomi could respond, someone approached their table. Marcus Chen, no relation to their music teacher, a seventh grader known for starting trouble. He stood over Naomi with his arms crossed, his expression somewhere between challenging and curious. "So you're the girl who destroyed Damon Cross?" Naomi set down her fork. "I didn't destroy anyone. I just asked him to sing." "Yeah, but you knew he couldn't. You set him up." "I didn't set up anything. He brought me on stage. He challenged me. I just didn't lie when he wanted me to." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "My mom loved him. Had posters and everything. She cried when she found out he was a fraud, said she felt stupid for believing in him." "I'm sorry," Naomi said quietly. "I didn't mean to—" "Nah, don't apologize." Marcus's expression shifted, something almost like respect creeping in. "She said she's glad you did it. Said better to know the truth than keep loving a lie." He nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Anyway, just wanted to say that. You did good." He walked away. The cafeteria noise resumed, gradually returning to normal levels. Destiny raised her eyebrows. "That was weird." "Yeah," Naomi agreed. But it had also been something else, a reminder that the truth she'd exposed hadn't just destroyed Damon Cross's career. It had broken something for millions of people who'd believed in him, who'd built their own dreams on the foundation of his manufactured perfection. And now they had to rebuild those dreams on something real. She didn't know if that was better or worse, just different. Harder, maybe, but honest. After lunch, she had music class. Walking into that familiar room, the old piano, the mismatched chairs, the water-stained ceiling tiles, felt like coming home. Mr. Chen stood at the front, organizing sheet music, and when he saw her, his whole face lit up. "Naomi, welcome back!" The other choir members were already there, and they broke into spontaneous applause. Not mocking, genuine. Naomi felt her face heat with embarrassment and pride in equal measure. "All right, settle down," Mr. Chen said, but he was grinning. "We've got a lot of work to do. Just because one of you is now professionally contracted doesn't mean the rest of you get to slack off." He was trying to make it normal, to treat her like just another student. Naomi appreciated that more than she could say. They ran through warm-ups, scales, breathing exercises. The familiar routine settled over Naomi like a comfortable blanket. This was what she'd missed during those weeks of chaos. The simple act of singing for no reason other than because it felt good. No cameras, no lawsuits, no world watching to judge whether she was authentic enough or talented enough or deserving enough. Just music, Just breath and sound, and the physics of vibration turned into something that could move people's hearts. At the end of class, Mr. Chen asked her to stay back. When the room cleared, he sat down at the piano and gestured for her to join him. "How are you really doing?" he asked. Naomi considered lying, saying she was fine, everything was great, but Mr. Chen had earned better than that. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Everyone keeps saying I'm brave, that I change things, that I'm some kind of hero. But I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a kid who asked a question and accidentally started a war." "You didn't start anything. Damon Cross started it 18 years ago when he decided to build a career on theft. You just ended it." "But what if I hadn't? What if I'd just stayed quiet like he wanted? Nobody would have gotten hurt. Those session singers wouldn't have had to relive their trauma. Millions of people wouldn't have had to find out their hero was a fraud. My mom wouldn't have had to deal with death threats and lawsuits and—" "Stop." Mr. Chen's voice was firm but gentle. "You're carrying weight that isn't yours to carry. Yes, truth has consequences, sometimes painful ones, but lies have consequences too. And the consequences of that lie. All those singers who had their work stolen, all the young artists who were told they'd never be good enough because they were being compared to an impossible standard that was manufactured in a studio, those consequences were already happening. You didn't cause them, you just exposed them." "Then why do I feel guilty?" Mr. Chen smiled sadly. "Because you're a good person. Good people feel the weight of their actions. They understand that even necessary choices can hurt people. That's not weakness, Naomi. That's empathy. Don't lose it." They sat in silence for a moment, the classroom quiet except for the distant sounds of students in the hallway. "I got a letter yesterday," Mr. Chen said, "from the school board. They're fully funding the music program for the next 3 years. New instruments, expanded class offerings, a proper rehearsal space. All because the publicity from what happened brought attention to how underfunded we were." Naomi's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" "And I got calls from 5 other schools in the district asking how they could start similar programs, because they saw what you did and they thought, if an 11-year-old from an underfunded school can stand up to a $400 million industry and win, maybe we should be taking these kids more seriously." "I didn't do it for that." "I know, but it happened anyway. That's the thing about standing up for truth, Naomi. You never know what ripples it's going to create. You just have to trust that honesty, in the long run, creates better ripples than lies." Naomi thought about that as she walked home after school. The bus was still late, still crowded, still smelled faintly of diesel and desperation. But when she climbed aboard and the driver saw her, he smiled. "You're that singer girl, right? The one who took on Damon Cross?" "Yes, sir. Heard what you did. My daughter, she's about your age. She saw you stand up to him and she came home talking about how she's not going to let anyone push her around anymore. So thank you for that." He waved off her fare. "Ride's on me today." Small gestures, small moments, but they accumulated into something larger, the slow realization that what she'd done had mattered to people she'd never meet, in ways she'd never fully understand. When she got home, actually home now, not Jackie's apartment, the place looked different than it had 3 weeks ago. They'd moved back after the settlement check from Damon's legal team had cleared. Not the full $5 million from the dropped lawsuit, but enough to cover their legal fees and compensate them for what Vanessa called the emotional distress of having your life destroyed by a frivolous lawsuit. $200,000. It was more money than Teresa had made in the last 5 years combined. They'd used some of it to pay off debt, some to fix the car, a small amount for a security deposit on a better apartment, nothing fancy, but one where the windows closed properly and the landlord actually fixed things when they broke. The rest went into savings, carefully managed by Vanessa to make sure it would last. Teresa was in the kitchen when Naomi arrived, cooking dinner on a stove that worked. She looked different too, not younger exactly, but less burdened, like someone who'd been carrying a boulder uphill for years and had finally been allowed to set it down. "How was school?" Teresa asked. "Good. Weird. But good." Naomi set her backpack down. "Mr. Chen says the music program got funded." "I heard. The principal called me, said they're naming a scholarship after you, the Naomi Brooks Award for Young Musicians. Full ride to any student who demonstrates both talent and courage." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. I don't deserve. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Teresa pointed a wooden spoon at her. You deserve everything good that comes from this. You stood up when nobody else would. You paid a price for it. Now you get to enjoy the benefits. That's how justice is supposed to work. They ate dinner together, actual food, not canned soup or day-old bread or the careful rationing that had defined their meals for years. Just a regular dinner, unremarkable and precious, because they didn't have to count the cost. After dinner, Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Turn on channel 7. Important. Naomi found the remote, switched on the television. The news was running a special report. Where are they now? The voices behind the fraud. The segment featured interviews with the session singers who'd come forward after Talia Monroe broke her silence. There were 11 of them in total, men and women of different ages and backgrounds, all sharing the same story of talent exploited, voices stolen, careers buried under NDAs and silence. But the segment wasn't about victimhood. It was about resurrection. Talia Monroe had released her first solo album, the songs she'd written years ago but never had the courage to record under her own name. It had debuted at number 3 on the charts. Marcus Webb, who'd sung the backing vocals on Damon's biggest hits, was headlining a concert tour. Sarah Chen had started a nonprofit helping young artists negotiate fair contracts and avoid the exploitation that had defined her own early career. The truth hadn't just destroyed Damon Cross. It had freed everyone his lie had imprisoned. The news anchor concluded with an update on Damon himself. Criminal charges had been filed: fraud, racketeering, violation of labor laws. His trial was scheduled for next year. In the meantime, he'd declared bankruptcy, lost his house, and reportedly was living with family in Florida while his lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal. Naomi thought she'd feel satisfaction at that news. Victory. Justice served. Instead, she felt oddly hollow. Damon Cross had been a person before he'd been a villain, someone with talent and ambition who'd made choices that had hardened over time into an entire architecture of deception. Watching that architecture collapse should have felt righteous. Instead, it just felt sad. Another text from Vanessa. Can you come to the office tomorrow after school? Someone wants to meet you. Naomi confirmed and went to bed early, exhausted by the emotional weight of being back in normal life when nothing felt quite normal anymore. The next afternoon, she and Teresa met Vanessa at her downtown office. But Vanessa wasn't alone. Sitting in the conference room, looking nervous and hopeful in equal measure, was Talia Monroe. Naomi stopped in the doorway, suddenly shy. This was the woman whose courage had amplified her own voice, the one who'd stepped forward when silence would have been safer. Talia stood, smiled. Naomi? It's good to finally meet you properly, without courtrooms and cameras. You too, Naomi managed. They sat. Vanessa poured water for everyone, then gestured for Talia to begin. I wanted to thank you in person, Talia said. I've tried to put it into words, what it meant to see you stand up to him, how it gave me permission to finally claim my own voice, but words feel inadequate. You didn't need my permission, Naomi said quietly. It was always your voice, always your songs. Legally, maybe, but psychologically, Talia paused, choosing her words carefully. I'd spent 15 years believing the lie that I wasn't good enough on my own, that I needed someone like Damon to make my voice matter. Watching you call him out, watching you prove that the emperor had no clothes, it broke something in me. The fear, the conditioning. And I realized that if an 11-year-old could stand in front of millions of people and demand truth, I could at least stand in front of a lawyer and demand my name on my own work. She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. I'm starting a foundation, Unbroken Voices. It's going to provide legal support, financial assistance, and advocacy for session musicians, backup singers, and other artists whose work gets exploited. I want to make sure what happened to me, what happened to all of us, doesn't keep happening to the next generation. Naomi opened the folder. Inside was a mission statement, a board of directors, and a program outline. At the bottom of the first page, in a section labeled Founding Inspiration, was Naomi's name. I didn't do anything, Naomi protested. You're the one who had the contracts, who came forward. You asked the question nobody else dared to ask, Talia interrupted gently. And sometimes that's all it takes. One person refusing to accept the comfortable lie, one voice saying, no, that's not right, and I'm going to prove it. You were that voice. And now I want to use my resources to protect other voices like yours. She pulled out another document, a scholarship program, fully funded for the next 10 years, specifically for young musicians from low-income backgrounds who demonstrated both exceptional talent and exceptional integrity. The first recipient, Talia said, if you're willing to accept it, is you. Full ride to whatever music school you choose when you're old enough. All expenses covered, no strings attached except one, that you use your voice honestly, that you never let anyone convince you to fail quietly. Naomi looked at her mother. Teresa's eyes were wet, her hand pressed to her mouth. I already have the Veritas Records deal, Naomi said. I don't need... This isn't about need, Talia said. This is about making sure you have options, so you never have to choose between truth and survival, so you can always afford to be honest. Naomi felt something break open in her chest. Not pain, but release. The terror of the last few weeks, the constant calculation of cost and consequence, the weight of wondering if standing up had been worth destroying her family's stability. It all released in a rush that left her gasping. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what else to say except thank you. Say you'll keep singing, Talia said. Say you'll keep being exactly who you are. That's all the thanks I need. They talked for another hour, about music, about the industry, about the small ways truth could reshape systems that had been built on exploitation. Vanessa outlined the legal protections they'd built into the foundation's structure. Teresa asked careful questions about sustainability and oversight. And Naomi mostly listened, watching these women who'd taken her small act of courage and transformed it into something institutional, something that would outlast all of them. When they finally left Vanessa's office, the sun was setting again, gold light painting the glass towers, the city alive with end-of-day energy. Teresa and Naomi stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to leave this moment. You know what the craziest part of all this is? Teresa said. What? A month ago, we were worried about returning a blouse. Now we're talking about scholarships and foundations and changing an entire industry. Teresa laughed, the sound edged with disbelief. How did we get here? You raised me right, Naomi said simply. You taught me truth mattered, even when it cost something. Especially when it costs something. Teresa pulled her close. I'm so proud of you, baby. Not because you're famous or talented, or because you took down a corrupt superstar. I'm proud because when the world gave you a choice between comfort and honesty, you chose honesty, even knowing what it would cost. They rode the bus home, still crowded, still late, but somehow different now. Or maybe they were different. Maybe poverty looked different when you knew it wasn't permanent, when you had options and resources and people fighting in your corner. Over the next few months, life found a new rhythm. Naomi recorded her first album with Veritas Records, not rushed, not manufactured to capitalize on her moment of fame, but carefully crafted with producers who cared more about artistic integrity than commercial success. It was a mix of original songs and covers. Her voice showcased honestly without studio manipulation or artificial perfection. The album sold modestly, didn't go platinum, didn't make her a household name beyond the context of the Damon Cross scandal. But it got respectful reviews from people who actually knew music, and more importantly, it was hers. Every note, every choice, every imperfection that proved the voice was real. Washington Heights. Middle school's music program flourished. Mr. Chen hired 2 assistant teachers. The choir performed at competitions and won awards. And every year, the Naomi Brooks Award went to a student who demonstrated both talent and courage, kids who sang truth even when the melody was hard. Talia Monroe's Unbroken Voices Foundation grew beyond anyone's expectations. They helped dozens of artists reclaim credit for stolen work, renegotiate exploitative contracts, and build careers on their own terms. The foundation became a model for ethical artist representation, and slowly, too slowly, but still, the industry began to shift. Damon Cross pleaded guilty to fraud and wire fraud charges. He served 18 months in a minimum security facility and was released on probation. His career was over. His legend destroyed. When asked by a reporter if he had any regrets, he said only, "I regret everything. But mostly I regret underestimating a kid with perfect pitch and nothing to lose. The reporter asked if he blamed Naomi. Damon shook his head. No, I blame myself. She just asked me to sing. I'm the one who couldn't. Naomi saw that interview and felt for the first time something like closure. Not forgiveness, that wasn't hers to give, but an acknowledgement that the man who'd tried to destroy her had been destroyed by his own choices, not hers. She'd simply refused to be complicit in his deception. On her 12th birthday, Naomi performed at the Orpheum Theater again, this time as a headliner, not a choir student. The venue was full, but not with millions watching online. Just a few hundred people who'd come to hear honest music performed by someone who'd proven she'd rather fail truthfully than succeed dishonestly. Before she sang, she stood in that same spotlight where everything had changed and said a few words. A year ago, I stood on this stage and asked a question that cost me everything I thought I couldn't afford to lose. My safety, my privacy, my family's peace. And what I learned was that truth costs everything, but lies cost more. They cost your voice, your integrity, your soul. She looked out at the audience, found her mother in the third row, Teresa's face shining with pride. I'm not a hero. I'm not special. I'm just a kid who got lucky enough to be raised by someone who taught me that dignity matters more than comfort, that being honest is harder than being convenient, and that your voice, your real voice, not the one people want you to have, is the most valuable thing you'll ever own. Don't let anyone steal it. Don't sell it for safety. And never, ever fail quietly. She sang that night like she'd sung in the courthouse. No tricks, no manipulation, just the voice she'd been born with and the truth she'd fought to preserve. When she hit the high C that had started everything, she held it longer than she needed to. Not showing off, just proving, one more time, that some things couldn't be faked. The applause was thunderous, real, earned. After the show, people lined up backstage, not for autographs or selfies, but to share their stories. The woman who'd quit her job after her boss tried to take credit for her work. The teenager who'd reported a teacher for plagiarism even though it meant social exile. The man who'd testified against his company for environmental fraud despite knowing it would cost him his career. All of them carrying the weight of choosing truth over convenience. All of them saying in their own ways, "You showed me it was possible. You showed me it was worth it." Naomi listened to each story, shook each hand, understood that what she'd done had somehow given other people permission to be brave. It was humbling and terrifying and beautiful all at once. Years later, when Naomi was in college studying music theory and working on her third album, a journalism student interviewed her for a documentary about the Damon Cross scandal. "Do you ever regret it?" the student asked. Asking that question, starting everything that followed? Naomi thought about it seriously. Remembered the death threats and the lawsuits and the brick through the window. Remembered her mother's tears and the sleepless nights and the constant fear that they'd lose everything. Then she remembered Talia Monroe's foundation, the Washington Heights music program, the countless messages from people who'd found courage in her example, the sessions singers who'd finally gotten credit for their work, the systematic changes in how the industry treated backup vocalists and studio musicians. "No," Naomi said, "I don't regret it, because the alternative was being complicit in a lie. And I've learned that you can survive a lot of things, poverty, harassment, even legal battles. But you can't survive betraying yourself. That kind of damage is permanent." The documentary aired to modest viewership but profound impact. It reignited conversations about authenticity in music, about the exploitation of artists, about the courage required to speak truth to power. And through it all, Naomi kept singing. Not because she was famous or successful or because the world demanded it, but because singing was honest, because her voice was hers, because she'd learned at 11 years old in a spotlight at the Orpheum Theater that the most powerful thing any person could do was refuse to fail quietly. She sang in small venues and large ones, for crowds and for herself, with perfect pitch and imperfect courage. And every note was true, because that's what she'd learned. That's what she'd taught the world. Truth has a voice, and sometimes that voice belongs to an 11-year-old girl in a too big blouse, standing alone in the spotlight, asking one simple question: can you really sing the note, or is it all a lie? Damon Cross couldn't answer honestly. The industry couldn't answer honestly. The machinery of image and exploitation and manufactured perfection couldn't answer honestly. But Naomi Brooks could. And she did. With perfect pitch, unbreakable courage, and a voice that refused to be silenced.